I'm Olivia Hayes, 26, a small-time investigative journalist in Baltimore. My life was supposed to be unremarkable until my missing uncle, Arthur, left me a wooden box with a note. Finish what I started. Inside was proof exposing Senator Henry Blackwood, a powerful man who covered up the murder of an activist 20 years ago. But what truly crushed me wasn't his crime, it was an old cassette tape, capturing the voice of my own father, Richard Hayes, promising he would take care of the victim. My parents spent their lives burying this truth, begging me to stay silent to protect our family. They thought I would break, that I would abandon justice just as they had. But they were wrong. What I hold now isn't just my uncle's evidence. It's the weapon that will bring them all down. I am a freelance investigative journalist. At least that is what I tell people. In reality, it feels more like I am an unpaid detective and a part-time barista of my own kitchen. Some weeks I get an article published in a small online magazine or a local paper, but most of the time I spend hours chasing leads that fall apart. I pitch stories to editors who never respond. I reread rejection emails that all start with the same polite but firm language. Thank you for your submission, but we will have to pass. It is not glamorous. It does not pay the bills, and yet I cannot quit. I cannot walk away because I have tasted the rush of telling a story that matters. The first time I saw my name on a story that got real attention, I felt something ignite inside me. That story was about a landlord who was charging tenants for fake repairs. I went through invoices line by line, interviewed people who were too scared to speak, and finally exposed him. When the article was published, tenants demanded refunds. Local news stations called me for interviews. For a week, I felt alive. For a week, I knew what it meant to put truth into the world and watch it shake something loose. My parents never understood that feeling. They believe in stability above all else. My father runs an insurance company and spends his weekends at the golf course. My mother floats from charity events to social luncheons where she can be seen with the right people. Their definition of success is measured in manicured lawns and plaques on walls. My definition has always been different, and that has been our quiet war for as long as I can remember. When I told them I wanted to be a journalist, my father looked at me with the same expression he might use if I said I wanted to run away and join a circus. My mother smiled tightly and said I was being dramatic. They reminded me of their favorite rule, the one I had grown up hearing like a lullaby with sharp edges. Do not stick your nose into other people's business, Olivia. They repeated it when I asked too many questions in school. They repeated it when I came home talking about unfair teachers or about classmates who were bullied. They repeated it whenever I asked about family members we never saw, people whose names floated around us like ghosts. When I was a child, I thought they meant to protect me. As I got older, I realized they were protecting themselves. People who tell you not to ask questions usually have the most to hide. Despite their warnings, I became exactly the kind of person they feared. Curious, stubborn, willing to dig. Then came the call that changed everything. It was a Wednesday morning in late September. The first bite of autumn was in the air. Sunlight slanted through my blinds in pale stripes. I was scrolling through news headlines at the kitchen table, sipping bitter coffee when my phone buzzed. The number was local but unfamiliar. "Is this Olivia Hayes?" a man's voice asked. "Yes, who is calling?" I said, bracing myself for a telemarketer. "This is attorney Michael Carter. I represent the estate of Arthur Hayes. I believe he was your uncle." The name struck me like a bell. Arthur Hayes, Uncle Arthur, my father's brother, the family ghost. I had not seen him in more than a decade. He had been a giant in journalism in the 90s, exposing corporate corruption and political scandals. He won awards, shook powerful men, and made enemies in every corner. Then he vanished. Some said he went missing overseas while chasing a story. Others said he had gone underground to escape threats. My parents never gave me a straight answer. They barely spoke of him at all. When they did, it was in whispers and with the same warning attached. Do not ask questions. I remembered the last time I saw him. I was 14. He came to Christmas dinner unshaven, carrying a cheap bottle of wine. My parents barely acknowledged him, but he spoke to me. He asked what I wanted to do with my life. When I told him I loved writing, his eyes lit up. He pulled a notebook from his bag and pressed it into my hands. "Write everything down, even the parts that scare you. I still have that notebook on my shelf." "Uncle Arthur, he passed away?" I asked, my throat tight. "Yes." "I am sorry for your loss," Carter said gently. "He left specific instructions. He wanted you to receive certain belongings. Could we arrange a time for you to pick them up?" "Yes," I whispered. We set a meeting for the afternoon. The hours dragged. I drove downtown in silence, the city rushing past me like a blur. Carter's office was on the fourth floor of a brick building. Inside, dark wood shelves lined the walls, heavy with law books. Behind a polished oak desk sat Michael Carter, a man in his late 50s with gray hair and calm eyes. "Miss Hayes," he said, shaking my hand warmly. "Thank you for coming. I know this is sudden." On his desk sat a wooden box. It was scratched, scarred, and fitted with a brass lock. My name was carved faintly into the lid. A small key was taped to the top. "This belonged to your uncle," Carter said. "He left clear instructions that it was to go only to you. He also asked me to deliver a message." His words were, and I quote, "Tell Olivia to follow the trail, no matter how dark it gets." The words sent a chill down my spine. I pulled the box toward me. It was heavier than it looked. I signed papers, thanked Carter, and walked out with the weight of it in my arms. The city around me moved on as though nothing had changed. People hurried to buses. Cars honked. Neon signs flickered on as the sky darkened. But for me, everything had shifted. I drove home with white knuckles gripping the wheel. The box sat on the passenger seat, humming with secrets. In my apartment, I set it on the kitchen table. For a long time, I just stared at it. My heart raced. The refrigerator hummed in the background. My hands shook as I peeled the key from the lid and slid it into the lock. The click was soft but final. I lifted the lid. Inside was a world that smelled faintly of dust and ink. Old manila folders stuffed with papers. Cassette tapes in cracked cases. Handwritten notes scrawled in hurried black ink. Yellowed photographs curled at the edges. And on top, a sealed envelope with my name written across it in bold letters. I tore it open. "Olivia, if you are reading this, it means I am gone. I cannot explain everything here, but I need you to finish what I started. The truth is buried deep, and powerful people want it to stay that way. Do not trust anyone easily. And remember, you are stronger than they think. Arthur." I read it 3 times. My throat closed, my eyes burned. I barely remembered the man, and yet in that moment I felt closer to him than to anyone in my life. He had chosen me. He had trusted me. I touched the first folder. My fingers brushed the brittle edge of the paper. That was the moment everything changed. The moment my ordinary life ended. The moment I stepped into the shadow of a story that had begun long before me, and I knew I would not be able to turn back. I spent hours staring at that box before I finally found the courage to dig deeper. The letter from Uncle Arthur still rested on the table beside my coffee mug, his words looping in my mind like a warning. "Follow the trail no matter how dark it gets. Do not trust anyone easily." I pushed the letter aside and reached for the first folder. The paper inside was brittle, yellowed around the edges, as if it had been pulled from filing cabinets decades ago. Names, numbers, addresses. Typed reports mixed with notes scribbled in the margins in my uncle's handwriting. The first page was a photocopy of what looked like a bank statement, a large transfer of funds from a private company to something called Northbridge Consulting. I frowned, scanning line after line. The numbers meant nothing to me at first, but then I noticed the signature at the bottom. It was the name of a man I recognized instantly from recent headlines. Senator Henry Blackwood. I leaned back in my chair. My heart kicked in my chest. Blackwood was everywhere these days. He was the kind of politician who seemed untouchable, the kind who shook hands in front of cameras while making deals in backrooms. Some saw him as a hero, others whispered about corruption, but no one ever managed to pin anything on him. Why was his name in my uncle's files? I pulled out the next page, a handwritten note. "Follow the money. Blackwood has roots in more than one family. The Hayes connection is deeper than Olivia knows." My skin prickled. He had written my name. I pressed my palm to the table, trying to steady myself. Had Uncle Arthur known I would end up here? Had he been writing these notes for me all along, even before he disappeared? The next folder contained photographs. Some were grainy black and white, others faded color prints. People standing outside office buildings, stepping into cars, shaking hands at gala events. At first they looked like ordinary snapshots, but the more I studied them, the more I recognized faces. Blackwood again. Several businessmen whose names I had only seen in financial reports. And then, a photo that made my stomach turn. My father. He was younger in the photo, maybe mid-30s, dressed in a suit. He was standing near Senator Blackwood, close enough that it was clear this was not a random photograph. They looked like colleagues, or at least acquaintances. I whispered to the empty room, "What the hell is this, Dad?" I shoved the photo back into the folder, but the image clung to me. My father, the man who always warned me never to stick my nose in other people's business, photographed standing next to one of the most powerful men in the country. I pushed the folders aside and pulled out one of the cassette tapes. The label was smudged, but I could still make out the words written in my uncle's cramped handwriting. Meeting at Harbor Point. 1999. I still owned a cheap cassette player I had bought at a thrift shop for a story about outdated technology. I dug it out from my closet, blew the dust off, and slid the tape inside. The player word crackled, then a voice filled my apartment. It was Arthur's voice, low but clear. This is Arthur Hayes. Meeting taking place at Harbor Point Warehouse. Participants include Henry Blackwood, Richard Hayes. My stomach dropped. Richard Hayes, my father. The tape continued, muffled at first, then voices came into focus. A man I assumed was Blackwood spoke with authority. If we keep the payments quiet, no one will question. The contracts are already in place. We just need silence. Another voice answered, my father. And if someone talks, then we handle it, Blackwood replied. Silence. Then my uncle's whisper. End of recording. I hit stop. My hands shook as I stared at the cassette player. My father's voice had just been captured agreeing to something shady with a United States senator. I pressed play again, as if hearing it twice would make it less real. But the words were the same. If someone talks, then we handle it. I pressed stop and sat frozen. The refrigerator hummed. A car honked outside. My phone buzzed with a notification, but I ignored it. I whispered, "What did you get yourself into, Dad?" I pushed back from the table and started pacing the apartment. My uncle had been investigating Blackwood, and somewhere along the way my own family had been dragged into it. That explained my parents' constant warnings, their obsession with me keeping quiet. They had been hiding something all along. I thought about calling them right then. I imagined my father's stern voice telling me I misunderstood, my mother's sharp tone demanding I drop it. But I knew better. Arthur's warning was still fresh in my mind. Do not trust anyone easily. Instead, I poured myself another coffee, even though my hands were already trembling. I sat back at the table and flipped through more of the files. The deeper I went, the darker it became. There were copies of legal documents showing land transfers that looked suspicious, receipts for luxury cars purchased under shell companies, newspaper clippings about a journalist who had been killed in a supposed car accident 20 years ago. On the back of that clipping, my uncle had written one word in all capital letters: murder. The weight of it pressed down on me. I closed the folder and leaned my head in my hands. That was when my phone buzzed again. This time it was a text from my mother. Dinner Sunday. Do not be late. We need to talk about your career choices. I almost laughed. Career choices. If she only knew what was sitting on my kitchen table. I typed back, I'll be there. But my mind was already racing. How could I sit across from them, knowing what I knew now? Knowing my father's voice was captured on tape alongside Blackwood. Knowing my uncle had been chasing something that had gotten him killed or worse. I turned off the cassette player and put the folders back in the box. I locked it again, slipped the key into my pocket, and carried the whole thing into my bedroom. I slid it under my bed as though that would make it safer. But sleep did not come that night. I lay awake listening to the faint hum of the city through my window, my uncle's words and my father's voice playing over and over in my mind. By morning, I knew one thing for certain. The life I thought was ordinary had just cracked wide open, and I was already in too deep to walk away. The next days felt like moving through fog. Every time I walked into my apartment, I caught myself glancing at the bed, knowing the box was hidden beneath it. It was like a second heartbeat pulsing under the floor. I could hear my uncle's voice on the tape even when it was turned off. If someone talks, then we handle it. And I could see my father's face in the photograph, standing beside Senator Henry Blackwood like they had always belonged in the same world. I tried to distract myself with work, but I could not focus. I opened my laptop, tried to write a pitch for a story about rising rent costs, but my fingers froze above the keyboard. The words on the page looked hollow compared to what was lying under my bed. I was sitting on evidence that could destroy one of the most powerful men in the country, and not just him. My own family was tangled up in this, maybe deeper than I wanted to admit. Sunday arrived sooner than I expected. Dinner at my parents' house was not optional. It never had been. My mother's text had been curt, as always. Dinner Sunday. Do not be late. We need to talk about your career choices. I pulled into the driveway of their suburban home as the sun was setting. The house was enormous, all granite and glass, the kind of place meant to impress neighbors rather than feel warm. I sat in my car for a long moment, staring at the glowing windows. I wondered if they looked any different knowing what I now knew. Finally, I got out and walked to the door. My mother opened it before I could knock. "Olivia," she said, her voice sharp with disapproval. "You are late." "I am right on time," I replied, stepping past her. The air inside smelled like roasted chicken and lemon polish. My father was in the living room, standing near the fireplace with a glass of scotch in hand. His presence filled the room even before he spoke. "Sit down," he said without looking at me. I sat on the edge of the couch, my bag beside me, my fingers brushing the small recorder I had slipped into it before leaving. I had debated whether to bring it. The end, I decided I wanted proof of whatever was about to happen. My mother perched on the armchair across from me, legs crossed, her designer dress perfectly pressed. She gave me a smile that did not reach her eyes. "We are worried about you, Olivia," she said. "This obsession with journalism, it is not healthy. You are chasing after shadows." I felt my jaw tight. "Funny, I thought you would like shadows. You spend so much time living in them." Her smile faltered. My father's eyes finally met mine. They were cold and calculating. "What do you mean by that?" he asked. I swallowed hard. This was the moment. I could not dance around it anymore. "I mean, I know about you in Blackwood," I said quietly. The silence that followed was heavy, like the air itself had thickened. My mother's face went pale. My father's jaw tightened. "You have no idea what you are talking about," he said finally, his voice low and dangerous. "I heard the tape," I whispered. "From Harbor Point. 1999, you were there. You said if someone talks, you handle it. What did you mean by that, Dad?" His glass clinked against the fireplace mantel as he set it down. He turned fully to face me now. "You should not have those tapes," he said. "So you admit they are real?" I pressed. He took a slow step toward me. "You do not understand the world you are stepping into. Those tapes could destroy lives. They could destroy you." My mother reached out, her voice trembling. "Please, Olivia, leave this alone. This is not your fight." "Not my fight," I snapped. "It is my family, my name. My uncle spent his life trying to expose this and he ended up dead. How is that not my fight?" My father's eyes darkened. "Arthur was reckless. He stuck his nose where it did not belong, and look where it got him." I felt my chest tight. "So it is true, he did not just disappear, something happened to him." My mother shook her head frantically. "Stop, just stop. You do not know what you are saying." "I know enough," I said. "I know you both spent years telling me not to ask questions. I know you tried to keep me quiet. Now I know why." My father leaned down so close I could smell the scotch on his breath. "If you care about this family, you will put those tapes back in the box and forget you ever saw them." I met his gaze. "And if I do not," his voice dropped lower, "then you will regret it." The recorder in my bag captured every word. Dinner never happened. My mother eventually rose, muttering something about the food burning in the oven, though none of us had moved toward the dining room. I grabbed my bag and stood. "I am going," I said. My father straightened, his face unreadable. "Do not come back here until you have your head on straight." My mother followed me to the door. For a moment her mask slipped and I saw fear in her eyes. She touched my arm. "Olivia," she whispered. "Please, they are watching all of us. If you keep digging, they will come for you too." I froze. "Who is they?" She pulled her hand back, shaking her head. "I cannot say, just please be careful." I walked out into the night, the cool air slapping my face. My hands were shaking so badly I nearly dropped my keys. I climbed into my car and sat there for a long time, staring at the house. My parents were not just hiding something, they were trapped in it. And now I was too. I drove home with my recorder playing softly in the passenger seat, replaying my father's threat. "If you care about this family, you will put those tapes back in the box and forget you ever saw them." I knew then I could not stop. If I stopped, the shadows would swallow me whole. When I got back to my apartment, I pulled the box from under my bed again. I spread the files across the floor, the photographs, the notes, the clippings. I sat among them until dawn, piecing together fragments of a puzzle I barely understood. And with every page I turned, one truth became clear. My uncle had not been reckless. He had been right. And finishing what he started was the only way forward. The night after I confronted my parents, I could not rest. Sleep was out of the question. Every time I closed my eyes, I heard my father's voice again, sharp and unyielding. "If you care about this family, you will put those tapes back in the box and forget you ever saw them." And behind those words was my mother's face, pale and trembling as she whispered that they were being watched. I lay in bed staring at the ceiling, the box under my bed pressing against my mind like a second heartbeat. Around 2 a.m, I gave up on trying to sleep. I pulled the box out, set it on the floor, and surrounded myself with the contents. Papers spread in uneven stacks, photographs curled at the edges, tapes lined up like black bricks waiting to be stacked into a wall. I turned on the small desk lamp and let the glow fall over everything. At first I tried to sort it, folder by folder, but every time I pulled out one sheet it led me to another and then another. I ended up sitting cross-legged in the middle of a paper storm, scribbling notes in a spiral-bound notebook, arrows and circles connecting names and dates. My handwriting grew frantic, like my uncle's urgency had infected me across time. One thin folder drew my eye. It looked ordinary compared to the rest, just a manila sleeve with a single clipping inside. I pulled it open and froze. The headline jumped out first: Local activist killed in car crash. The article was from the summer of 2000. It reported that a man named Thomas Reynolds had died when his car veered off a rural road late at night. Authorities claimed alcohol was involved. No foul play suspected. Just another tragedy filed away under bad luck. I might have skimmed past it if not for the word written across the top in my uncle's bold handwriting: murder. The letters looked carved into the page with the weight of his pen. I read the article twice. Reynolds was described as a community organizer. He was known for protesting at the state capitol, leading rallies, and publishing open letters about shady land contracts. The piece said he left behind a wife and a young daughter. No names were given, just that they lived quietly after his death. On the back of the clipping, Arthur had written more: Blackwood, Reynolds, Hayes, and beneath the names a single sentence: They silenced him. Do not let them bury the truth. I felt my throat tight. I flipped through the folder. There were more photographs, black and white, grainy color, all showing Reynolds at different events. He stood on courthouse steps holding a megaphone. He shook hands with workers outside a construction site. In one picture, he was speaking passionately to a small group of men outside a warehouse. I held the photo closer, squinting. My heart stopped. One of the men standing there was my father. He looked younger, maybe mid-30s, but the shape of his face was unmistakable. My father standing beside a man who would be dead only weeks later. The room spun. I pressed the photo flat against the carpet like that would erase it, but the image clung to my mind. My father, the man who told me my entire life to keep quiet, photographed with a man who ended up dead. My hands shook as I dug for more. Another sheet, this time a photocopy of police reports. The crash scene. Officers noted skid marks on the road but claimed they showed reckless driving. I leaned closer. In the margins, Arthur had written his own questions. Why no toxicology? Why sealed so quickly? Who pressured the coroner? I whispered to the empty room. What did you do, Dad? I reached for one of the cassettes. The label was smudged, but I could still make out the words. March 2000. I slid it into the player and pressed play. The tape hissed at first, then voices emerged. Footsteps, murmurs, then my uncle's voice, calm and low. This is Arthur Hayes, meeting outside Capitol steps. Subject is Reynolds. There was shuffling, then a man spoke sharply. That man is a problem. If he keeps shouting about contracts, the press will sniff around. Another voice answered, deep and familiar, my father. People like him burn out. He will run out of steam. Then a third voice, Henry Blackwood, confident, controlled. Not if we keep giving him oxygen. I want him gone. No more delays. Silence. Then my father again. I will take care of it. The tape cut off. I sat frozen. My finger hovered over the stop button. My heart was hammering so hard it drowned out everything else. I replayed it, hoping I had misheard, but the words were the same. I will take care of it. The recorder clicked off, and the silence that followed was heavier than any sound. I stumbled to my feet, pacing the room in tight circles. My chest hurt. I wanted to believe it was not what it sounded like. Maybe they were talking about silencing him politically, not literally. Maybe my father meant to outmaneuver him, not kill him, but deep down I knew. My uncle would not have written murder in bold letters across that clipping if it was anything less. I pressed my hands against my face. Tears burned behind my eyes, but I forced them back. If I cried now, I would never stop. Instead, I pulled my laptop toward me. I typed Thomas Reynolds into the search bar and let the results load. There were hardly any articles. A few small obituaries, mentions in old archives about his activism, then silence. It was like his name had been scrubbed from history. I dug deeper, scrolling through forums, old digital records, anything I could find. Finally, I came across a community blog post from years ago. It was written by a woman who said she remembered Reynolds as a neighbor. She mentioned his wife had moved away with their daughter after his death, never to be seen again. No names, just a vague reference to starting over far from here. I sat back, staring at the screen. Somewhere out there, a woman and her daughter had lived for 20 years without answers. They had been told it was an accident. Meanwhile, my father and Blackwood had moved on with their lives, untouched. Anger flared in me, hot and sharp. I thought of the dinners in my parents' house, the expensive wine, the rehearsed smiles. I thought of my father's cold warning to me, if you care about this family, you will put those tapes back in the box. And I thought of Reynolds, a man who cared enough about truth to speak out, silenced forever. I whispered, not this time. I started writing everything in my notebook. Dates, names, Quotes, the tape's transcript, the notes from the police report. I wanted a map of the whole story, every thread my uncle had pulled. My handwriting was messy but urgent, page after page. It was almost dawn when I finally set the pen down. My eyes burned, my body ached. I pushed the papers into piles, shoved the folders back into the box, and slid it under the bed again. Just as I was about to crawl into bed, I froze. There it was again. A sound outside my apartment door. A faint scuff, like someone shifting their weight. I crept to the peephole, my heart racing. The hallway looked empty, but I knew what I had heard. Someone had been there, listening. I stayed perfectly still until the silence stretched too long. Finally, I forced myself to step back, locking every bolt on the door. I turned out the lights and sat in the dark with my recorder in my lap. Fear sat heavy in my chest, but beneath it was something else. A fire I had not felt in years. They were watching me, which meant I was on the right trail. And that meant I could not stop now. The morning after the footsteps outside my door, I woke with the uneasy feeling that my apartment was no longer my own. The air felt heavier. The blinds rattled even though the windows were closed. Every sound from the hallway set my nerves on edge. I kept thinking about the way my mother had whispered to me at the door of their house. They are watching all of us. If I stayed locked inside, fear would eat me alive. I needed someone who knew more than I did. Someone who had been close to Arthur, someone who could tell me if I was chasing shadows or if I was standing on solid ground. That was when I remembered a name from one of the folders. It was scribbled in Arthur's handwriting on a yellow sticky note, Daniel Brooks, a phone number scrawled beneath it. I remembered hearing the name before. When I was younger, Arthur had once mentioned him at Christmas, calling him his partner in crime. At the time I thought he meant it as a joke. Now I knew better. I stared at the note for a long time before dialing. The line rang twice before a deep voice answered. "Hello, Mr. Brooks," I asked, my voice trembling slightly. "Who is this?" "This is Olivia Hayes. I am Arthur Hayes' niece." There was a pause on the other end. I could hear him breathing, then his voice softened. "Olivia, I wondered if you would call one day. How is Arthur?" I swallowed. "He passed away, recently." Another pause, this one longer. "Damn," I figured. But I hoped maybe he had just gone underground again. "I am sorry, kid." Something about the way he called me kid made me both wary and oddly comforted. "He left me a box," I said carefully. "Files, notes, tapes. I think he wanted me to finish what he started." Daniel exhaled, a long, low sound. That sounds like him, always leaving unfinished business, always pulling people into storms bigger than themselves. "Did you work with him?" I asked. "For years," Daniel said. Chase stories no one else would touch, corporate fraud, political payoffs. He was fearless, too fearless sometimes. His voice grew quieter. I told him to back off Blackwood, told him it was too dangerous, but he never listened. The hairs on my arms rose. "So you knew about Blackwood?" "Knew enough," Daniel said. "Arthur was convinced there was a trail of blood under all that money. He said Blackwood was not just corrupt. He said he was lethal." I tightened my grip on the phone. He was right. Silence stretched between us. Finally, Daniel said, "We should not talk about this over the phone. Do you want to meet?" I hesitated. Arthur's warning rang in my head. Do not trust anyone easily, but I needed answers. "Yes," I said. "Where?" "There is a diner off Route 40 near the river," he said. "Middle of the afternoon, it is half empty. Meet me there tomorrow, 2 o'clock. I agreed, hung up, and stared at the phone like it might burn me. The next day, I drove out to the diner. It was the kind of place that had probably not changed in 30 years. A neon sign flickered over the door. The parking lot was nearly empty. Inside, the booths were cracked vinyl and the tables were sticky no matter how often they were wiped down. A waitress with tired eyes poured me coffee without asking. Daniel was already there, sitting in the corner booth. He was older than I expected, late 40s, maybe early 50s. His hair was graying at the temples, his face weathered, his suit wrinkled. He looked like a man who had seen too much and carried it all in his shoulders. "Olivia," he said as I slid into the booth. "You look just like your uncle." I smiled faintly. "I barely remember him." "He talked about you more than you know," Daniel said. "He wanted you to stay out of this world. Guess that did not work out." I sipped my coffee, studying him. His eyes were sharp, restless, always moving as if scanning the room for threats. "Arthur left me his files," I said quietly. "There is a lot in there. Evidence. Blackwood, my father." Daniel's jaw tightened. "I figured as much. Richard Hayes was deeper in it than people realize. Arthur told me once he was afraid for you, that your parents were not just keeping you away from trouble, they were keeping you away from their own sins." I felt a sting in my chest. "I heard my father on tape. He said about Reynolds, he said he would take care of it." Daniel's face darkened. "I know, I was there when Arthur recorded it." He made me promise to hold onto a copy in case something happened to him. You still have it? I asked quickly. He shook his head. Not anymore. People came after me too. I had to burn most of it just to stay alive. Arthur kept the most damning evidence himself. If you have it now, then you are holding the kind of truth that people kill for. The words sat heavy between us. What do I do with it? I asked. Daniel leaned closer, his voice dropping. You protect it. And you do not breathe a word until you know who you can trust. Arthur trusted very few people for a reason. The system is rotten. Cops, judges, even some journalists. Blackwood has money in every pocket. I swallowed hard. So I cannot go to the police. Not unless you want to end up like Arthur, Daniel said flatly. The waitress brought him a black coffee and a plate of fries. He pushed them aside without eating. I will help you, he said. For Arthur, but you have to be careful. If they know you have the files, they will come for you. I nodded, though fear twisted my stomach. We talked for over an hour. He told me stories of traveling with Arthur, of nights spent in cheap motels, of chasing leads through alleyways and courtrooms. His words painted a picture of my uncle I had never known. A man who had been both brilliant and reckless, who had believed that truth was worth more than safety. As I drove home that evening, I felt a strange mix of relief and unease. Relief that I was not alone anymore. Unease because I did not fully trust Daniel. Something in his eyes when he said he had burned his copies of the evidence had unsettled me. Why had he kept nothing if he had truly wanted to help? Why had he survived when Arthur had not? Arthur's warning returned again. Do not trust anyone easily. I told myself I would keep Daniel close, but not too close. And as I pulled into my apartment parking lot, I noticed a black sedan idling across the street. The windows were tinted. The engine hummed. I parked quickly and hurried inside without looking back. Someone was watching me, and maybe, just maybe, they had been watching me all along. I could not shake the image of the black sedan outside my apartment. When I closed my blinds that night, I half expected to see headlights glowing through the cracks. Sleep was impossible. Every sound made me sit up in bed. The creak of the pipes, the groan of the floorboards upstairs, the hum of the refrigerator. I kept reaching for the box under my bed just to make sure it was still there, as if someone might have slipped in and taken it while I blinked. By morning, my nerves were stretched thin. I brewed coffee just to have something to hold in my shaking hands. I sat at the kitchen table staring at the box like it was alive. I told myself I was being paranoid, that the sedan had been nothing, that the footsteps outside my door had been coincidence. But when I stepped out into the hallway, I noticed something that made my blood run cold. My doorframe had a scratch along the lock, a thin line of metal shaved away, almost invisible unless you were looking for it. Someone had tried to force it. I slammed the door shut again, my breath shallow. Whoever was watching me was no longer satisfied with staying outside. My phone buzzed, a text from Daniel. You all right, kid? I hesitated, then typed back. I think someone tried to get into my place last night. The dots appeared, then his reply. Not surprising, you need to be careful. Do not stay alone if you can help it. I bit my lip, staring at the message. I wanted to believe he was on my side. He sounded protective, but something in me still bristled. Arthur's warning echoed again. Do not trust anyone easily. I decided I could not just sit here waiting to be hunted. I needed to know more about Reynolds, the activist who had been killed. If my father and Blackwood had silenced him, maybe his family still carried pieces of the truth. Maybe they deserved to hear what I had uncovered. I pulled up the old blog post I had found the night before, the one written by a neighbor who said Reynolds' wife and daughter had disappeared after his death. I scrolled through the comments. Most were generic condolences, but one stood out. A woman wrote that she had gone to high school with Reynolds' daughter, that her name was Emily, and that she had last heard she was living somewhere in Philadelphia. It was the only lead I had. I spent hours searching online. Social media, old yearbooks, public records. Finally, I found a profile that seemed right. Emily Reynolds. The picture was small, a blurry graduation photo, but the age lined up. She looked like she would be around my age. I stared at the screen, debating. Reaching out would be reckless. If people were watching me, they might be watching her too, but doing nothing felt worse. I drafted a message, deleted it, drafted another. Finally, I wrote, Hi Emily, my name is Olivia Hayes. I think our families might be connected. I have information about your father that I believe you should know. Please call me. I left my number and hit send before I could stop myself. The moment it was gone, I regretted it. What if she thought I was crazy? What if she ignored it? What if it put her in danger? I shut my laptop and pressed my palms against my eyes. That evening, I decided to go for a walk just to clear my head. The city was busy, people moving in every direction, cars honking, buses screeching to stops. but even in the noise I felt it. The sense of being watched. I glanced over my shoulder. A man in a dark jacket was walking half a block behind me. Maybe it was nothing. Maybe he just happened to be heading the same way. I turned down a side street. So did he. I slowed near a shop window pretending to look inside. He slowed too. My chest tightened. I cut across the street, weaving through traffic. He followed. By the time I reached the next intersection, panic had taken over. I ducked into a crowded coffee shop and slipped into the restroom, locking the door behind me. My hands shook as I gripped the sink. I stared at my reflection, pale and wide-eyed. Whoever he was, he had been following me. There was no denying it now. I stayed in the restroom until my breathing slowed. When I finally stepped back into the shop, the man was gone. But the fear remained, crawling under my skin. I hurried home, double-locked the door, and sat with the box again. I told myself that this was proof I was close, that people would not follow me if I was chasing nothing. But the truth was colder. They were closing in. My phone buzzed again that night. A new text, this time from an unknown number. "Stop digging or you will end up like Arthur." I dropped the phone onto the floor, my heart slamming in my chest. This was no longer paranoia. This was real. And I knew then, with a clarity that scared me more than anything else, that my uncle had been right. I was in the middle of something far bigger than myself, and there was no going back. I do not know why I kept going back to their house. Maybe it was because I was desperate for answers, or maybe it was because I wanted to see if they would finally look me in the eyes and admit what they had done. The threats on my phone, the scratches at my door, the black sedan waiting across the street, all of it felt like a storm circling me. And in the center of that storm was my family. When Sunday arrived, I drove to my parents' house with the radio off, the only sound the hum of the engine and the ragged beat of my heart. The closer I got, the harder my hands clenched the wheel. Their neighborhood was as pristine as ever, the kind of place where neighbors trimmed their lawns in perfect symmetry and waved politely while secretly measuring each other's success. I wondered how many of those neighbors knew that behind the polished windows of my parents' house was a secret that could bring down a senator and unravel lives. The front door opened before I even touched the bell. My father stood there, tall and stern in his pressed shirt. His face was set in the same expression he always wore when he was disappointed in me, which was most of the time. "You are late," he said flatly. "I am on time," I replied, brushing past him. Inside, the air was heavy with the smell of roasted chicken, garlic, and lemon polish. Everything gleamed, the wood floors, the glass cabinets, even the silver forks laid out on the dining table. My mother was fussing with the plates, her hands trembling slightly as she aligned them. When she saw me, she pasted on a smile that cracked at the edges. "Olivia," she said, her voice too bright, "you made it." I slid into one of the chairs without waiting to be asked. The table was set for 3, though there was enough food for a small army. It felt like theater, like they were clinging to the ritual of dinner in hopes it would keep the walls from caving in. My father poured himself a drink and sat at the head of the table. He did not touch the food. He did not even look at it. His eyes were on me, cold and sharp. "You should have listened to us," he said finally. "You should have left the past where it belongs." I leaned forward, my voice steady even though my hands shook in my lap. "You mean the lies, you mean the murder." My mother flinched as if the word had cut her. She dropped her fork, and it clattered against the plate with a sound that echoed too loudly in the room. She bent quickly to pick it up, her face turned away, as if she could hide the fear in her eyes. My father's jaw tightened. "You have no idea what you're saying." "I know enough," I shot back. "I know you stood beside Blackwood. I know you said you would take care of Reynolds. I know Arthur left proof. I have heard your voice on tape. You cannot lie to me anymore." For a moment his expression cracked. A flicker of something, recognition, maybe even guilt, passed over his face before the mask returned. "Arthur was reckless," he said. "He stuck his nose where it did not belong. And now you are making the same mistake." I slammed my hands onto the table. The plates rattled. My voice came out sharper than I intended. "This is not a mistake. This is the truth, and you have been hiding from it for 20 years. My mother's eyes filled with tears. "Please, Olivia, not so loud, please." I turned to her. "Why, who are you afraid will hear us? The neighbors? Or the men Blackwood sends to make sure we stay quiet?" Her hands twisted the napkin in her lap until it tore. She whispered, "We never wanted any of this, we just wanted to protect you." The words stung, but I pressed harder. "Protect me from what? From the truth? From knowing that my own father helped cover up a murder?" My father slammed his glass down on the table so hard some of the scotch sloshed onto the wood. He leaned toward me, his voice a low growl. "You think you are ready for this world, but you are not. Blackwood is not a man you can fight. He owns judges. He owns cops. He owns people you have never even heard of. If you go against him, he will destroy you. And if you drag us with you, he will destroy us too. I met his eyes without blinking. Maybe he should be destroyed. The silence that followed was suffocating. The only sound was my mother's quiet sobbing. You sound just like Arthur, my father said finally, his voice tight with anger and something else. And you know what happened to him? The weight of his words hung over us like a shadow. For years, they had spoken of Arthur's disappearance as if it were some unfortunate mystery, some accident of fate. But here, in this moment, my father's slip said everything. Arthur had not just vanished. Something had happened to him, and my father knew exactly what. Tears threatened to rise in my throat, but I swallowed them back. So it is true, he was killed, and you let me grow up thinking he just walked away. My mother covered her face with her hands. We could not tell you, you were a child. We wanted you safe. I shook my head. Safe? You think ignorance is safety? You think living in the dark is safety? You chained me to lies and called it protection. My father's eyes hardened. You cannot save Arthur, Olivia. He made his choice. If you keep pushing, you will end up the same way, and there will be nothing I can do to stop it. I pushed back my chair and stood. The table groaned under the sudden movement. Then do not stop it. I would rather die chasing the truth than live in your silence. My father stood too, towering over me. If you do this, you will bring them down on all of us. Is that what you want, to watch your mother suffer, to watch this family be torn apart? I turned toward my mother. We are already torn apart, you just do not want to admit it. Her tears fell freely now. She reached for me, her voice breaking. Please, Olivia, if you love us, stop. They are watching us. They have been watching us for years. Every move we make, every word we speak. You do not know what they are capable of. I pulled back. I know enough, and I am not afraid of them anymore. My father's face turned to stone. He sat back down slowly, as if dismissing me. Then you are no longer part of this family. The words hit harder than I expected. For a moment, the little girl in me wanted to collapse, wanted to beg for his approval. But that little girl was gone. I walked to the door. My mother followed, her hand trembling as she touched my arm. Her voice was barely a whisper. Please be careful. We are already prisoners. Do not make yourself one too. I looked into her eyes and saw the truth of it. They had been prisoners for decades, trapped in a cage built by Blackwood's power and their own fear. I stepped out into the night without answering. The air was cold, sharp in my lungs. When I reached my car, I saw it again. The black sedan parked across the street, engine idling, headlights off. I stood there for a long moment staring at it, daring it to move. Finally, the engine growled and the car slipped away into the dark. I climbed into my car, gripping the steering wheel so tight my hands hurt. I whispered to myself, "You will not scare me off. Not this time." Back at my apartment, I spread the files across the floor again. Blackwood's smile stared up at me from photographs. My father stood stiff beside him. Reynolds raised his fist in defiance. And Arthur's handwriting ran across the pages like a voice calling from the grave. I sat among the papers until dawn, my eyes raw, my body aching, my heart heavy. But beneath the fear, beneath the grief, there was something else. Resolve. If my parents would not speak, I would. If they were too afraid to fight, I would fight. If Arthur had died trying to tell the truth, then I would finish what he started, because the weight of blood was already on our family, and silence would not wash it away. The morning after I confronted my parents, I woke to silence that felt heavier than usual. It pressed against my walls, against my chest. For a long time, I lay in bed staring at the ceiling, replaying every word from the night before. My father's cold dismissal. My mother's whispered warning. We are already prisoners. Do not make yourself one too. I pushed the covers off and reached for the box. The wood was cool against my palms, the brass lock faintly scratched from years of use. I carried it into the living room and set it on the floor. My body ached from lack of sleep, but I could not stop. If I stopped, the silence would swallow me whole. One folder had been bothering me ever since I first saw it. Thin, worn, tucked beneath the others like it was meant to be overlooked. I pulled it out and opened it slowly. Inside were police reports, autopsy notes, photographs that made my stomach twist. At the top of the first page was the name that had haunted me since I found it in Arthur's files: Thomas Reynolds. The police report was cold and clinical: single vehicle accident. Driver lost control on rural road. Weather clear, alcohol suspected. Case closed within 48 hours. I read it 3 times, each word sharper than the last. It was all too neat, too fast. On the back page, Arthur had written in his hurried script, "No toxicology, no witnesses." Why sealed so quickly? Who pressured the coroner? My hands trembled as I flipped to the autopsy notes. Cause of death, blunt force trauma consistent with car crash. But in the margins, Arthur had circled several lines and written his own observations. Fracture patterns inconsistent. Bruising suggests struggle. I pressed the paper flat, my chest tightening. It was not just corruption. It was not just money. This was blood. I turned to the photographs. They were grainy, taken at night under harsh flash. A crumpled car at the bottom of an embankment. Shattered glass glinting in the dirt. A body covered with a sheet, only the shoes visible. I closed my eyes and whispered, God. Arthur's handwriting scrawled across the back of one photo in all capital letters. Not an accident. I pushed the pictures aside and found another document, this one a typed transcript of an interview Arthur had conducted. It was with a man identified only as Source A. His words were short, nervous. I saw him arguing with Blackwood's men outside a bar 2 nights before the crash. He told me he had something big, something that would bury them. Next thing I knew, he was dead. That was no accident. The page ended there. No signature, no follow-up. I sat back, rubbing my temples. Reynolds had been a threat, and he had paid with his life. My father's voice from the tape echoed in my mind. I will take care of it. I shoved the papers aside and stood, pacing the room. My hands were shaking too badly to hold still. I wanted to scream, to smash something, but instead I grabbed my notebook and began to write. Reynolds' name in bold letters, the date of his death, the inconsistencies in the autopsy, the quote from Source A, the tape of my father. I circled the word murder in red ink until the page tore. Hours passed like minutes. The sun slipped lower in the sky, shadows stretching across my apartment. The box sat open like a wound, its contents spilling out around me. My phone buzzed, jolting me. It was a new message from an unknown number. Still digging, you are next. I dropped the phone onto the floor, my pulse racing. I ran to the window and yanked the blinds. Across the street, the black sedan was there again, engine idling, windows tinted. It sat like a predator waiting. I whispered to myself, you will not scare me off. My voice shook, but the words steadied me. I grabbed my phone again, scrolling through contacts. My thumb hovered over Daniel's number. He had told me to be careful, to trust no one, but he had also said he would help me. Did I dare tell him what I had found in the Reynolds folder? I hesitated, then put the phone down. Arthur's warning rang in my head louder than ever. Do not trust anyone easily. Instead, I opened my laptop. I searched for Thomas Reynolds again, digging deeper this time. Most of the official records were buried or incomplete, but I found an old archive of a local newspaper, long since defunct. One article mentioned that Reynolds had been preparing to testify before a committee about suspicious land deals tied to a company called Northbridge Consulting, the same name I had seen in Arthur's files. The company that funneled money to Blackwood. It all connected. I pulled out the photographs again. One in particular caught my eye, the one of Reynolds speaking to a group outside a warehouse. I studied the faces. My father was there. Younger, his hair darker, his jaw set. Standing close enough to Reynolds that it could not be a chance. The betrayal burned in my chest. He had told me to leave the past alone. He had told me I did not understand. But he had been standing there, tied to it all. I pressed the photo flat on the floor, staring at it until my vision blurred. That night I dreamed of Reynolds. His face blurred and shifting, his voice calling for justice in a crowd that never listened. I woke drenched in sweat, the threat message still glowing on my phone. Still digging. You are next. I sat on the edge of the bed, the box open at my feet. The files whispered to me, pages rustling in the night air. I thought of Reynolds' wife and daughter living for 20 years without answers. I thought of Arthur, who had died trying to expose this. I thought of my parents, prisoners in their own silence. And I knew with a clarity that cut through the fear, I could not stop. Not now. If Reynolds had been silenced, if Arthur had been silenced, then it was up to me. Because the truth was already bleeding through the cracks, and someone had to drag it into the light, even if it killed me. The days after I uncovered the truth about Thomas Reynolds bled into each other. I stopped keeping track of time. The blinds in my apartment stayed closed, and the only light was the yellow glow of my desk lamp. The files from Arthur's box covered the floor like a paper ocean, and I sat in the middle of it, cross-legged, with notebooks scattered around me. I barely ate. I barely slept. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw the wrecked car at the bottom of the embankment, the word murder scribbled across the photograph in my uncle's hand. But more than the images, it was the silence that unnerved me. The silence of the hallway outside my door. The silence of the street where the black sedan sometimes appeared, engine running, headlights off. It was not silence at all. It was waiting. Watching. By the third day, I could not stand it anymore. I needed to hear another voice, someone who at least understood Arthur and the trail he had left behind. My fingers hovered over my phone for hours before I finally gave in and dialed Daniel's number. He picked up on the first ring, as if he had been waiting. Olivia. The sound of my name in his voice sent a rush of relief through me, but it faded quickly. "It is getting worse," I said, my voice low. "They are outside my building. They know I have the files." His reply was calm, too calm. "Of course they know, they always know. The moment Arthur put those files together, the moment he decided to fight, they marked him. And now they have marked you." I swallowed hard. "You sound like you expected this." "I did," he said simply. "Arthur thought he could outrun them. He thought if he gathered enough evidence and handed it to the right people, the truth would win. But the truth does not win by itself. Power wins, money wins. Blackwood knows that better than anyone." The way he said it chilled me. I imagined him sitting somewhere dark, smoking a cigarette, waiting for me to hand him the last pieces Arthur had left behind. "So what do?" I asked. "You cannot keep those files in your apartment," he said quickly. "That is the worst place for them. If they break in while you are asleep, if they set a fire, everything is gone. You need backup. You need me. Bring them to me and we can figure out what matters most, what we can use safely." His urgency sounded almost rehearsed. I gripped the phone tighter. "I could make copies." "No," he said sharply. Then his voice softened like he realized he had slipped. "I mean, copies are not enough. If the originals fall into the wrong hands, the copies will be dismissed as fakes. Arthur's handwriting, his recordings, the physical evidence, that is what matters. That is what gives weight to the story. Without it, you have nothing." Every word scraped at me. He was not wrong, but something in the way he pressed, the way he insisted on originals, made my stomach twist. "I will think about it," I told him. "I will call you tomorrow." When I hung up, I sat frozen in the silence of my apartment. I stared at the phone until the screen went black. Arthur's warning whispered in my mind again. "Do not trust anyone easily." I thought of the way Daniel had looked at me in the diner, his eyes sharp and restless, scanning every corner of the room. He had told me stories about Arthur, painted him as a man too reckless for his own good. But now, when he believed I was desperate, he asked for the files. Not notes, not a summary, not even a copy. The originals. Why had he survived when Arthur had not? That night, I decided I would not be caught unprepared. I laid the files out carefully, page by page, and photographed every single one. I used my phone until its battery nearly died, then switched to a cheap digital camera I had used for past assignments. Each photo went into a cloud folder protected with passwords. I backed them up again onto a flash drive, then another, one of which I tucked into my wallet, the other I taped under the drawer of my desk. If someone took the box, if they broke into my apartment, they would not take the truth from me. Just as I was sliding the last folder back into the box, there was a knock at my door. Sharp, 3 quick raps that made me jump to my feet. My heart slammed in my chest. It was past midnight. No one I trusted would be knocking now. I crept to the peephole. Daniel stood there. For a second I thought I was hallucinating. His figure loomed in the dim hallway, his hand still raised as if ready to knock again. My breath caught. I had not told him where I lived. I had never given him my address. "Olivia," his voice came through the wood, muffled but clear. "It is me. Open the door." I stayed silent, my body pressed against the wall. He knocked again, softer this time. "I know you are scared. I know you do not trust me. But you need to. You cannot do this alone. Let me in." I covered my mouth with my hand to keep from making a sound. For what felt like an eternity, he stood there, waiting. My knees ached from crouching by the door, my heart beat loud enough I was sure he could hear it. Finally, his footsteps retreated. I waited, straining to listen. A faint ding echoed through the hallway, the elevator doors closing. Only then did I breathe. I slid to the floor, my back against the door, shaking from head to toe. He had come for the files. That much I knew now. When the sun rose, I was still awake, the files scattered around me, the recorder in my lap. I could not stop replaying it in my mind. The knock, the calm voice, the certainty with which he said I could not do this alone. I wanted to believe he was still on my side. I wanted to believe Arthur had trusted him for a reason, but I had seen enough now to know. Trust was a luxury I could not afford. The wall of betrayal was already rising, brick by brick, and I was running out of time. The day after Daniel appeared at my door, I felt the walls closing in on me. I could not eat, I could not think, I could not even step outside without my skin prickling like eyes were following me. Every sound in the hallway made me tense, every car door slamming outside made me flinch. By nightfall, I was pacing my apartment like a trapped animal. I told myself I was ready if he came back. I had the files backed up. I had my phone charged. I even kept the recorder in my pocket just in case. But when the knock finally came, none of that mattered. It was louder this time. Harder. "Olivia," Daniel's voice called. "We need to talk, now." I froze, my pulse thudded in my ears. I backed away from the door, clutching the recorder so tightly my hand hurt. "I know you are in there," he said. His tone was no longer soft, no longer coaxing. It was sharp, commanding. "Open the door." Silence stretched, then the rattle of the knob. He was testing it. I grabbed the box from under the bed and shoved it into my backpack, my hands shaking. I zipped it up, slipped the straps over my shoulders, and moved toward the fire escape window. "Olivia," Daniel's voice dropped lower. "You think you can run from this? You think Arthur ran? Look where it got him." My chest tightened. The doorknob rattled again, harder this time. A thud followed. He was testing the frame. I yanked the window open and climbed onto the metal fire escape. The air outside was cold, biting against my skin. My backpack dragged heavy on my shoulders. I crouched low and started down the creaking stairs. Behind me, the sound of wood splintering filled the air. The door was breaking. "Olivia," Daniel shouted. "You are making a mistake." I did not look back. I gripped the railing and moved as fast as I could. My boots clanged against the metal steps, too loud in the night. By the time I reached the alley below, headlights flared at the mouth of the street. A black sedan idled there, engine rumbling like an animal waiting to pounce. I froze for a second, heart pounding. Then I ran. The alley stretched long and narrow, littered with trash bags and broken glass. My backpack slammed against my spine with every step. Behind me, footsteps echoed on the fire escape. Daniel was coming. "Stop running," his voice boomed. "You have no idea what you're carrying." I turned down a side street, lungs burning. The sedan's engine roared as it pulled forward, rolling slowly alongside the alley, matching my pace like a predator stalking prey. I cut across the street, weaving through traffic, horns blaring as cars swerved. My breath came ragged, my vision blurring. I ducked into a narrow passage between two buildings, pressed myself against the brick, and waited. The sedan rolled past, its headlights sweeping the street. Daniel's footsteps pounded closer. I gripped the straps of my backpack, pressing my body flat against the wall. He passed the mouth of the alley, his head snapping side to side, searching. For a moment, I thought he would turn in, but he kept moving. When his footsteps faded, I exhaled shakily. I slipped deeper into the shadows, winding through side streets until I reached the subway entrance. I hurried down the stairs, my hood pulled low, my breath fogging in the cold air. On the platform, I sat hunched on a bench, backpack pressed against my chest. The fluorescent lights buzzed overhead. A handful of strangers stood scattered across the platform, none of them paying attention to me. For the first time all night, I felt like I could breathe. But I knew better than to believe I was safe. Daniel had shown his hand. He had tried to force his way into my apartment. He had chased me through the streets. Whatever loyalty he once had to Arthur was gone. Now he was hunting me. I boarded the train when it screeched into the station, slid into a seat, and stared at my reflection in the darkened window. My face looked pale, hollowed, older somehow. I whispered to myself, "You cannot stop now, not after this." The train rattled forward into the tunnel. I did not know where I was going, but I knew I could not go back. Not to my apartment, not to my parents, not to anyone I thought I could trust. I was on my own, and the chase had only just begun. The subway carried me across the city like a metal coffin rattling through dark veins. I sat with my backpack hugged tight against my chest, my fingers gripping the straps so hard my knuckles were white. Inside that bag was everything: Arthur's notes, the tapes, the photographs, the police reports. His handwriting, his voice, his blood in paper form, and Daniel had tried to take it. My reflection in the window did not look like me. Pale, hollow eyes, lips pressed thin, hair unkempt. I looked like someone who had been living underground for weeks, even though it had only been days. Fear and determination mixed inside me like poison and fire. I knew I could not go back to my apartment. Daniel had been there. He knew where I lived. And I was certain that if I returned, I would not make it out again. I needed another place, somewhere safe, someone I could trust. That word, trust, felt foreign in my mouth. I had trusted my parents, and they had been hiding the truth for decades. I had trusted Daniel, and he had come for me in the night. Who was left, and then, through the fog of exhaustion, her name rose to the surface. Sarah Miller. Sarah had been one of the few bright spots in college. I had been struggling in those days, juggling part-time jobs, late-night deadlines, and professors who dismissed me as too young, too emotional to ever be a real reporter. Sarah had been different. She had been studying computer science, brilliant in a way that seemed untouchable, always hunched over her laptop in the back corner of the library with headphones on and fingers moving like lightning. We had met by accident. I had lost a file for a major assignment, my laptop corrupted, and I had been on the verge of tears in the library. She had slid into the chair across from me, looked at my screen for less than a minute, and then grinned. "You want your file back? Hayes, you are lucky I like puzzles." 5 minutes later, it was restored. I remember staring at her like she had performed magic. She just laughed, pushed her glasses up the bridge of her nose, and said, "It is not magic. It is just knowing where people hide their secrets." That was Sarah. Sharp, eccentric, loyal to the core. After graduation, she had slipped into the shadow world of cybersecurity. Sometimes she worked with nonprofits protecting journalists and whistleblowers. Sometimes she worked for private clients who could afford her. She lived in gray spaces, bending rules but never breaking her own code. If anyone could protect Arthur's files, it was her. I pulled out my phone and scrolled through contacts I had not touched in years. There it was, Sarah Miller. I stared at it until my thumb trembled, then pressed call. The line rang twice before a voice came through. "Quick, alert. Sarah. Sarah, it is me, Olivia Hayes." There was a pause, then a laugh that was half surprise, half disbelief. "Olivia Hayes, wow, I have not heard that name in forever. Where have you been hiding, you sound?" Her voice softened. "You sound wrecked." "I need your help," I whispered. My throat was tight, and I do not know who else to call. Instantly her tone shifted. The playfulness was gone. "Where are you?" I told her the station where I planned to get off. She did not ask why. She just said, "There is a coffee shop across the street. Sit by the window, I will find you." When I arrived, she was already there, leaning against the counter with 2 steaming cups in hand. She looked different, sharper, her hair shorter, dark strands falling against her cheek. But when she saw me, her smile spread wide, the same old Sarah. "Olivia," she said, holding out a cup. "God, you look like hell." "It feels worse than that," I admitted, taking the cup. We slid into a booth in the corner, away from the windows. The coffee was hot against my palms, and for a moment I let myself just breathe. Sarah studied me. "Tell me." I hesitated, then leaned in close. "I have evidence. From my Uncle Arthur. Do you remember him?" "Of course," she said. "The journalist." "The one who vanished?" I nodded, my throat tightened. "He left me a box. Files, tapes, photographs. He was investigating Senator Blackwood before he disappeared. He found proof of corruption. And more, a murder. They killed Thomas Reynolds and made it look like an accident. They killed Arthur too, and now they are coming for me." Sarah's eyes widened. Her fingers tightened on her cup. "Jesus, Olivia." I unzipped my backpack just enough to show her a folder, the worn edges, Arthur's handwriting across the top. Her breath caught. "Okay," she said firmly. "Come with me, now." We left the shop and walked 2 blocks to her loft. The building was a converted warehouse, brick walls scrawled with graffiti, the stairwell echoing with our footsteps. She led me to the top floor and unlocked a heavy steel door with 3 separate locks. Inside was chaos and order woven together. Cables snaked across the floor. Towers of hardware blinked in steady rhythms. Monitors lined the walls, screens filled with code, maps, graphs. It smelled faintly of solder and coffee. "You are safe here," she said, throwing the locks behind us. "No one gets in without me knowing." I sank onto her couch, exhaustion pressing down on me, but I could not close my eyes, not yet. "Sarah, I need you to back everything up. Not just copies of copies. I need it somewhere they cannot touch." Her lips curved into a faint grin. Finally, a request in my language. For the next 3 hours she worked. I handed her folder after folder, tape after tape. She scanned every page, every photograph, every note. She digitized the cassettes, running them through software that cleaned up the audio until my father's voice came through sharp and undeniable. She typed fast, her fingers moving with a rhythm that was almost musical. I watched as she built fortresses of code around the files, layer after layer of encryption, rerouting them through servers in places I could not even pronounce. "Even if they try," she explained, "by the time they track 1 copy, the other 10 will already be out in the wild." Her confidence steadied me. For the first time since Arthur's box had landed in my hands, I felt like the evidence was not just fragile paper that could be burned or stolen. It was alive now, multiplied, hidden, untouchable. When she finally leaned back, stretching her arms, she looked at me with something close to admiration. "Olivia, this is dynamite. If half of this is real and it looks real, Blackwood is finished. But you need to understand something. This is not just a story. This is war. They will not stop. No wonder your uncle vanished." My eyes burned. "I know, and I cannot stop either." She studied me for a long moment, then nodded. "All right. Then we do this together, but we do it smart. You cannot just dump everything online. They will bury it or twist it into lies. We release it piece by piece. We build the case. We force the public to pay attention. If you hit too fast, they will kill the story and maybe you. If you hit right, they cannot silence it." Her words settled deep inside me. strategy, control, not chaos. For the first time in weeks, I felt something that almost resembled hope. I was not alone anymore. But even as relief flooded me, a shadow lingered at the edge of my thoughts. Daniel had stood outside my door in the night. Daniel had chased me through the alleyways. Daniel was still out there, and he was not finished with me. I woke on Sarah's couch to the hum of machines. For a moment, I did not know where I was. The loft smelled of coffee and electronics, faintly metallic and alive. The monitors glowed in the dim morning light, casting blue across the walls like an ocean tide. My backpack sat on the floor beside me, slumped but safe, and Sarah was already at her desk, typing furiously. "You talk in your sleep," she said without looking up. I sat up slowly, my body stiff. What did I say? Arthur's name, over and over. She glanced at me then, her expression softer. "You must have loved him a lot." I swallowed hard. He was the only one who ever believed in me, and now I am all that is left of him. Sarah spun her chair toward me. "Then let us make sure he is not forgotten. I stayed up half the night cleaning those tapes. I have never heard anything like it. Your father's voice, Blackwood's name, talk about Reynolds. If the public hears this, it will explode." "But they will bury it," I said. "They always bury it. My uncle knew that. He tried to publish and they silenced him." "Which is why we cannot just drop it all at once," Sarah replied. "We play their game but better, small leaks. One recording here, one document there. Each release timed so they cannot stamp it out before the next one drops. Each release forcing more eyes onto the story." Her plan spread out in my mind like a map. It made sense. Arthur had gathered the evidence, but he had never been able to weaponize it. Maybe because he was alone. I was not anymore. I rubbed my temples. How do we know who to send it to first? Everyone is compromised. The cops, the courts, the newspapers. Blackwood has his people everywhere. Sarah smirked. "That is where I come in. There are still some clean voices. Independent outlets. Journalists who would rather die than sell out. Activists who know how to push stories into the light. Whistleblower platforms, anonymous networks. We spread it wide. If one outlet caves, 5 more still carry it. If one gets shut down, 10 more share it. We make the truth impossible to erase." Her words filled me with a fragile but growing fire. Then we do it. We hit them where they cannot block us. But even as I said it, doubt crept in. What if they come here? What if Daniel finds this place? Sarah leaned back, a faint smile playing on her lips. "Let them try. This building is mine. Cameras on every entrance, firewalls on every network. If Daniel or his friends even sniff around, I will know before they do." Her confidence was contagious, but fear still gnawed at me. I thought of the black sedan, of Daniel's fist pounding on my door, of my father's voice warning me that Blackwood owned everyone. "They will not just come for me," I said quietly. "They will come for you too." Sarah shrugged. "Let them. I am not afraid of men who hide behind money and power. I have fought worse than Blackwood." She leaned forward, her eyes sharp. "But you, Olivia, you need to decide how far you are willing to go. Because once we push the first domino, there is no turning back. They will know it is you." I stared at the glowing monitors, at the folders now replicated in digital form, living beyond paper and ink. I thought of Reynolds, widow and daughter, living with unanswered questions for decades. I thought of Arthur, who had died alone in the dark because he would not be silenced. I thought of my parents, prisoners of their own fear. "I will not stop," I whispered. Sarah nodded once. "Then neither will I." The room was quiet for a long moment except for the hum of machines. Then one of the monitors beeped softly. Sarah swiveled back to it, frowning. "What is it?" I asked. "Someone is probing the network," she muttered. Her fingers flew across the keyboard. "Trying to trace the files I uploaded. They are looking for you already." My chest tightened. "Can you stop them? I can slow them down," she said. "But this means we do not have as much time as I thought. Daniel or someone higher up knows you made backups. They are already trying to find the source." The fragile hope inside me cracked, replaced by the same relentless fear. But beneath it was something else too, resolve. "They want to find me," I said. "Then we will make sure they find the truth first." Sarah's eyes flicked to me, a faint grin tugging at her lips. "Now you are thinking like a fighter." She turned back to the screen, her hands moving in a blur. "Let us build the first release, something undeniable, something they cannot spin away." I leaned forward, the fire in my chest growing. "Then we start with Reynolds." Her grin widened. "Perfect. Murder is hard to sweep under a rug." The city outside Sarah's loft moved with its usual rhythm, cars humming on distant streets, sirens echoing faintly from some far-off block, but inside it felt like the world had frozen. The monitors glowed a cold blue across her walls, their light painting both of us in restless shadows. I sat curled up on her couch with my backpack still at my feet, unable to loosen my grip on it even though every single file inside had already been copied and protected. I could not sleep. My body begged for rest, but my mind churned like a storm tide, pulling me under each time I thought I had found stillness. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw Reynolds' face in the grainy photograph, the car twisted in the dirt, Arthur's handwriting screaming not an accident. Sarah broke the silence first. She set her coffee cup down on the desk and spun her chair toward me. Her dark hair was tied back, stray strands escaping as her glasses reflected the glow of code on the screen. "You know," she said, "we cannot just dump everything at once. If we throw the whole box out there in a single wave, they will bury it. They will spin it, discredit it, drown it under counter stories. You need to start with something sharp, something that cuts so deep they cannot dull it." I knew exactly what she meant. Reynolds, her eyebrow arched, the accident. The murder, I corrected, the word heavy on my tongue. The autopsy inconsistencies, the sealed report, the witness who saw him arguing with Blackwood's men, and the tape. Sarah leaned forward, eyes narrowing. "The one with your father's voice." I nodded, my throat tight. "That is the strike. It has to be. A senator covering up shady contracts might not make people flinch. But a senator tied to a murder cover-up, one that silenced a man who tried to expose him, that they cannot ignore." She studied me for a long time, then nodded slowly. "You are right. We go for the jugular." For the next few hours, we built the package piece by piece. She scanned Arthur's notes and matched them with the police reports, overlaying his handwriting with digital transcriptions. She restored the grainy photographs of the wreck, sharpening the lines until the image of the crumpled car glowed in stark detail. She clipped the autopsy excerpts, highlighting the fractures Arthur had circled and his notes questioning the bruises. And then finally, the recording. When the file played, the sound filled the loft with a ghost's breath. "I will take care of it." It was my father's voice. I had known it the moment I first heard the tape, but hearing it again in this room made my stomach twist. I pressed my hand over my mouth to keep from breaking. Sarah's gaze lingered on me. "You do not have to use it if it is too much." I shook my head. "We do. It is not about me anymore. It is about him, about Reynolds, about Arthur. The world needs to hear it." Her fingers moved across the keyboard with speed and precision. She bundled the evidence together into a single encrypted file, layering in protections, creating links that would scatter across the globe once released. "This way," she explained, "even if they knock one server offline, the others will already be mirroring it. By the time Blackwood's people try to pull it down, it will already be replicated in 10 countries. I leaned closer, watching the cursor hover over the final command. My heart pounded in my ears. Sarah looked at me. "You understand, once we do this, your face will be the next headline. Blackwood will know it is you. He will throw everything at you. He will not stop." I stared at the screen. My reflection in the glass looked pale, hollow, but my eyes burned with something I had not seen in myself before. Fire. "I am already his target," I said. My voice trembled but held. "So let him know why." I pressed the key. The file launched. The monitors lit up with a cascade of green lines as the data bounced from server to server, spreading like a lit match across dry grass. Sarah let out a long breath and smiled faintly. "It is done." We sat in silence for a long moment, the hum of her machines filling the air. I thought I would feel relief, but instead the weight doubled. The choice was made. The war was real. Then her phone buzzed. She checked it and grinned. "Look at this. A whistleblower board already pinned it. People are commenting like wildfire. Someone just wrote, 'If this is true, Blackwood is finished.'" My pulse raced. "Already?" She turned her monitor so I could see. Independent outlets were already picking it up. Small blogs, alternative news sites, journalists hungry for a story that no one else dared to touch. The headlines glared in bold letters. "Senator Blackwood linked to cover up in Reynolds' death. New audio raises questions in 20-year-old case who really killed Thomas Reynolds." I stared at the screen, my chest tight. The spark had caught. But sparks drew attention. One of Sarah's monitors flashed red, an alert slicing through the room. She cursed under her breath and started typing fast. "What is it?" I asked, my voice sharp. "Someone is hammering the network," she muttered. "Tracing the leak. They are good, better than most. This is not a random attack. This is targeted." Cold dread slid through me. "Daniel. Or someone above him," she said, eyes locked on the code. "But it does not matter. They know you hit them. They are already hunting harder." I looked back at the screen, at the words shouting the truth that had been buried for 20 years. Somewhere, Reynolds' widow might be reading it for the first time, finally seeing her husband's name tied to the justice he deserved. Somewhere, my father was hearing his own voice on the news. Somewhere, Blackwood was slamming his fist onto a desk, demanding to know who dared to challenge him. I whispered, "Arthur, we did it. Your story is out." Sarah's voice cut through the silence, sharp but steady. "Then we cannot stop now. If we want this fire to spread, we need the next spark ready before they snuff this one out." By the next morning, the world had shifted. I woke on Sarah's couch with the sun spilling through the high warehouse windows and the hum of her computers filling the air. She was already at her desk, headphones around her neck, fingers moving fast across the keyboard. "Wake up, sleeping beauty," she said without looking at me. "You are trending." I rubbed my eyes and forced myself upright. "Trending?" She turned one of the monitors toward me. Social media feeds scrolled in endless streams, hashtags flashing across the screen. Reynolds case. Blackwood cover-up. Who killed Reynolds? My throat tightened. There it was, Arthur's handwriting scanned and highlighted in neon boxes, my father's voice in clipped audio files embedded into threads. Commenters argued in real time, some furious, some shocked, some calling it fake. "Is it sticking?" I asked. Sarah leaned back, her expression smug. "Oh, it is sticking. The clip of your dad's voice has already been played over 50,000 times. People are matching it to old interviews of him. Some audio nerds are comparing waveforms and saying the match is 98%. Blackwood's PR team is already working overtime to scream fake news, which honestly is the best sign we could ask for." I stood and paced the floor, heart hammering. "And Blackwood?" "Hold on," she said, turning another monitor. A video feed played from a news channel. There was Blackwood, standing behind a podium with the flag draped perfectly behind him, his suit crisp, his hair neat. His face was calm, practiced. "I want to make it clear," his voice boomed, smooth and measured, "that these so-called revelations are nothing more than slanderous fabrications designed to smear my reputation. I have spent my life in service to the people of this country, and I will not allow a coward hiding behind anonymous leaks to destroy the truth. Thomas Reynolds was a good man and his death was a tragedy, but these claims are false, they are lies, they are beneath contempt." The crowd of reporters shouted questions. Blackwood lifted his chin, raised his hand, and walked away without answering. My stomach churned. He made it look so easy, so polished, as if decades of rot were nothing but rumors. Sarah snorted. "Classic. Deny, deflect, pretend to be the victim. He will ride that line until the wheels fall off. The question is whether the wheels fall faster than he can spin them." I collapsed back onto the couch, pressing my hands over my face. "People will believe him. He is too powerful, too smooth. They will call it a conspiracy." Sarah crossed the room and crouched in front of me, forcing me to meet her eyes. "Some will, but not all. This is how it starts. First they deny, then the cracks appear, then the dam breaks. Do not lose your nerve now." I tried to steady my breathing, but then Sarah's phone buzzed again. She checked it and frowned. Well, that did not take long. "What?" I asked. She handed me the screen. A news alert glared in bold letters. Voice in leaked recording identified as former city contractor George Hayes, my father's name. The article was short but brutal. Analysts were claiming with confidence that the voice on the tape belonged to my father, once a mid-level city official, now retired. They painted him as the fall guy, the expendable pawn. Blackwood's name was mentioned, but always with the qualifier allegedly. My father's name was the headline. I sank back, my vision blurring. They are burning him to save themselves. Sarah's eyes softened. They will chew through anyone they need to, even family. I wanted to scream. I wanted to smash the screen, but instead I sat frozen, my mind spiraling. My father's face filled my memory, stern and distant, the way he had stared at me across the dinner table when I confronted him. "You think you can fight Blackwood? You have no idea who you are up against." And now he was the shield they held up to protect Blackwood. Sarah sat beside me, her hand on my arm. "You have two choices. You let them make your father the scapegoat, or you drop the next bomb that ties Blackwood so tight to Reynolds' death he cannot wriggle out." I shook my head, my voice breaking. "If I drop more, my father is finished. If I stay quiet, Blackwood walks free. Either way, I lose." Sarah's grip tightened. "You do not lose if you tell the truth. That is what Arthur believed. That is why he died. Do not let Blackwood write this story for you." I pressed my hands into my eyes until stars burst in the darkness. I could still hear Arthur's voice in my memory, the way he once said, "The only thing worse than a lie is silence." When I lowered my hands, I met Sarah's gaze. "Then we go harder. We tie Blackwood directly. We bring the whole machine down." Her lips curved into a grim smile. "That is the spirit." The monitors flashed again, showing comment threads exploding, articles multiplying, the world gnawing at the spark we had lit. And behind all of it, I could feel the storm gathering. Blackwood had made his move. Now it was my turn. The storm outside was nothing compared to the one inside my head. By the second night after we leaked Reynolds' files, the world had turned into a roar I could not silence. Headlines multiplied like wildfire. Screens filled with debates, voices shouting over each other, some demanding Blackwood's resignation, others calling the evidence doctored, others insisting it was part of some larger plot. Every time I looked at my phone, it buzzed again. Unknown numbers, reporters, strangers. Some begged for an interview, some threatened, some promised to expose me if I did not explain myself. Friends from college sent frantic messages asking if it was true, if I was safe, if I even knew what I was doing. I ignored them all. I had no space for explanations. My body was already stretched thin, my nerves worn raw. Sarah was the only anchor I had left. She sat hunched over her desk, her dark hair tied back messily, 4 monitors glowing in front of her. Each screen told a different story. One displayed the flood of headlines, each one louder than the last. Another mapped the servers where Arthur's files had spread, green dots scattered across the globe like stars. The third showed government agencies pulling old records on Reynolds, moving with sudden, desperate speed to rewrite the narrative. The fourth burned red with intrusion attempts, line after line of digital claws scratching at her defenses. "They are escalating," Sarah muttered, her fingers flying. Her voice was calm but edged with tension. "This is not amateurs anymore. They are using government-level resources. This is coordinated." I sat on the couch, knees pulled to my chest, backpack at my side. My fingers dug into the straps. "Can you hold them off?" "For now," she said without looking at me. "But this is not a game of defense. This is a chess match with grandmasters who do not care about the rules. If they cannot break in through the network, they will come for you in person. That is how this works." Her words sat like lead in my chest. I knew she was right. I had already seen the black sedan waiting outside my apartment. I had already felt Daniel's shadow at my door. They would not stop. My phone buzzed again. This time it was not a reporter or a stranger. It was him, Daniel. The name on the screen made my stomach twist. My hands froze, fingers hovering but refusing to touch. Sarah noticed immediately. "Who is it?" "Daniel," I whispered, her eyes sharpened. "Do not answer." The buzzing continued, then stopped. A moment later, a new sound voicemail. My chest tightened as I opened it. His voice poured through the speaker, calm, steady, but colder than I had ever heard it. "Olivia. You cannot win this way. You think the files make you strong, but they make you vulnerable. Blackwood knows you are the leak. He knows where to find you. I am giving you one chance. Meet me tomorrow night at the old train yard on River Street. Bring the box. If you do not, they will come for you, and it will not be pretty. You have 24 hours. The message ended with silence that rang louder than the words. I sat frozen, the phone heavy in my hand. My breath came shallow, each inhale sharp in my chest. Sarah snatched the phone from me, replayed the message on speaker, and when it ended, she slammed it onto the desk so hard it rattled. "He is baiting you," she said. "This is a trap. If you go, you will not walk away." I curled my fists in my lap, nails digging into my palms. "If I do not go, he will come here. He said they already know where to find me." Sarah crossed the room in quick strides, standing over me. Her eyes blazed. "Then let them come. I have firewalls, cameras, dead man switches. If they touch this place, they burn with it." But her fire did not settle me. Daniel's voice still crawled through my head. "You cannot win this way. Bring the box. 24 hours. The thought of handing the box over made me sick, but the thought of waiting, of sitting still while they hunted me, was worse. Arthur's voice echoed in memory, the old cassette recordings, his words scratched with urgency. "Do not trust anyone easily. Do not wait until it is too late." I rose suddenly, pacing the loft. The air felt too tight, my skin prickling with restless energy. If I go, maybe I can stall him. Maybe I can get him to talk. If I record him, if he slips and admits anything, that could be the nail in Blackwood's coffin. Sarah slammed her hand onto the back of a chair. "Or it could be the nail in yours. Olivia, listen to me. Arthur died because he trusted the wrong person. Do you want to end up the same way?" Her words cut deep, but the fire inside me burned hotter. I turned to her. "I am not Arthur. I will not go down quietly. If Daniel wants me face to face, then I will face him." For a moment she just stared at me, anger flashing in her eyes, then her shoulders lowered, her breath sharp. "If you are going, then I am going with you, but we are not walking into this blind. If Daniel wants the box, then we give him something else." "A decoy," I whispered. "Exactly," she said. "We give him a shell, just enough to keep him busy. While he is distracted, we push the next leak live, something even bigger than Reynolds. We split his focus. We split Blackwood. They will not know which fire to put out first." I stopped pacing, my chest heaving, and met her eyes. "The second leak." Sarah's jaw tightened. The contracts, the offshore accounts, the trail that ties Blackwood's money straight into the shadows. If Reynolds was the spark, this would be the gasoline. I sank onto the couch again, my legs shaking, my heart still racing with the aftershock of Daniel's voice. Then we plan this carefully. Tomorrow night I will face him, but this time I am not walking alone. Sarah sat beside me, her hands steady on mine. No, she said, her voice fierce and low. This time you are going in armed with the truth, and if Daniel thinks he can corner you, then he is the one who is going to bleed. The room went silent except for the hum of her machines. But beneath the silence, I could already hear the storm building. Tomorrow night I will step into the lion's den, and I would not come out the same. The night before the meeting, I did not sleep. I stretched out on Sarah's couch with my backpack clutched against me, staring up at the high beams of the loft ceiling while the city moved faintly outside. Every sound made me flinch. Every gust of wind rattling the old windows felt like footsteps. My mind would not stop circling Daniel's words. 24 hours, bring the box. If you do not, they will come for you. When dawn broke gray and cold, Sarah was still at her desk. She had not slept either. She had spent the night building firewalls and traps, typing code until her fingers cramped. Her monitors glowed with layers of encryption and red lines marking intrusion attempts. You should eat something, she said without looking at me. I cannot, I admitted. My stomach was a knot. She finally turned toward me, her eyes ringed with exhaustion but blazing with resolve. Then at least drink water. You cannot face him half dead already. I obeyed, sipping from the glass she handed me. The water felt sharp in my throat, almost painful, but it steadied me. We spent the day planning every detail. Sarah built a decoy box identical to Arthur, worn edges and all, but inside were blank papers and copies that meant nothing without the originals. She tucked a small tracking device under the lining, something she said would let us know where Daniel ran if he took it. Meanwhile, she prepared the second leak. This one was bigger, heavier than the Reynolds file. Offshore accounts tied directly to shell companies that funneled money back into Blackwood's campaigns, names of donors who had never wanted to be seen, contracts awarded to front organizations run by his allies. It was the kind of corruption so intricate it looked like architecture. This, Sarah said, tapping the folder on her desk, is the web, the money trail that connects every dirty deal he ever made. If Reynolds was the knife, this is the guillotine. I stared at it, my pulse quickening. We release it while I meet him, she nodded. Exactly. While he is trying to intimidate you, while he is waiting for you to hand over the box, the world gets another piece of the truth. He cannot plug both leaks at once. The hours crawled. I paced the loft, rehearsing in my head what I would say, how I would hold my ground, what questions I could throw at Daniel to make him slip. Part of me wanted to scream, to let rage carry me through, but another part knew I would have to keep my voice calm, my face unreadable, my fear buried deep. When the sky darkened, Sarah set the decoy box on the table. It is time. I slipped on my jacket and pulled the straps of the backpack over my shoulders, heavier now with more than just paper. Heavier with everything Arthur had left me. Sarah handed me a small recorder, no bigger than my thumb. Keep this in your pocket, she said. It will record everything. If Daniel admits anything, even by accident, we will have him. I slid it into my coat, my hands trembling. She looked at me for a long moment. Are you ready? No, I said honestly, but I am going anyway. We drove together through the city, headlights carving pale beams across the streets. Sarah's car rattled faintly, the heater humming. Neither of us spoke much. The silence between us was heavy, not from distance but from the weight of what was coming. The train yard loomed ahead, dark and skeletal against the night sky. Rusted tracks cut into the dirt like scars. Old boxcars stood abandoned, their paint peeling, their windows shattered. It was the kind of place where voices echoed too long, where the shadows swallowed you whole. Sarah parked a block away and killed the engine. She turned to me. I will be here the whole time. If anything goes wrong, you run. Do not argue. Do not try to fight. You run. I nodded, my throat too tight for words. She handed me a small earpiece. I will be listening. You will not be alone. I slid it in and stepped out into the cold night. The air smelled of rust and oil, sharp in my lungs. My boots crunched on gravel as I walked toward the yard, each step echoing louder than it should. My backpack pressed heavy against me, every ounce of weight reminding me what was at stake. In the distance, a figure stood beneath the skeletal frame of an old signal tower. His posture was relaxed, hands in his coat pockets, but even from far away I knew it was Daniel. I stopped a dozen yards away, my breath fogging in the air. You came, he said, his voice carrying easily in the empty space. You gave me no choice, I answered. He tilted his head, a faint smile on his lips. There's always a choice. Yours was a smart one, now hand me the box. My grip tightened on the straps. First you tell me why Arthur, why Reynolds, why me? His smile faded. You do not want the answers to those questions. Yes, I said, my voice steady even as my chest pounded. I do. Silence stretched. Then he sighed, his breath white in the cold. Arthur was a liability. He thought exposing the truth was more important than surviving. He forgot who holds the power. Reynolds was the same. And now you are making their mistake. Every word seared into me. My fingers brushed the recorder hidden in my pocket. His voice was clear, damning. Give me the box, Olivia, he said again, his tone harder now. You walk away and this ends. You hold on to it and you will not live long enough to regret it. Behind the earpiece, Sarah's voice whispered. Keep him talking. The second leak is live. I glanced toward the shadows of the yard, my heart racing. Somewhere beyond the city, the world was already receiving the next wave of Arthur's truth. Offshore accounts. Shell companies, the blood money trail straight to Blackwood. Daniel stepped closer. Choose carefully, this is your last chance. I tightened my grip on the box. No, I whispered. This is yours. Daniel's eyes glinted in the shadows of the train yard, cold and steady. His hands stayed in his coat pockets, but his presence carried weight like a man who knew he held power. The air between us was sharp, heavy with rust and fear. Olivia, he said softly, you are not cut out for this. You are a girl who writes stories and thinks words can change the world. But this is not about stories. This is about survival. And if you do not hand me that box, survival is not something you will taste again. I pressed the straps of the backpack tighter into my shoulders. My heart pounded against my ribs, but my voice came clear. Arthur believed words could change the world. That is why he is dead. But he was right, and you are standing here proving him right again. His jaw twitched. Arthur was a fool. He trusted me. He trusted everyone. He thought his righteousness made him invincible. You think you are smarter than him, you are not. Every word struck like a blade, but beneath the pain I felt the fire grow. My thumb brushed the recorder hidden in my pocket. His voice was spilling into it, damning, undeniable. Behind my ear, Sarah's whisper crackled through the earpiece. Stay steady, the second leak is exploding. Blackwood's name is everywhere. Daniel stepped closer, his face emerging from shadow. His eyes were hard, his mouth a thin line. Do you think the world will save you, Olivia? Do you think your files make you powerful? Blackwood has been burying stories longer than you have been alive. He owns courts, judges, cops, editors. By the time your evidence hits the headlines, it will be nothing but ash. You cannot win. I shook my head slowly. You are wrong, look around you. The story is already alive. It is burning through every wall you tried to build. And this time, you cannot kill it. For the first time, I saw it in his eyes, a flicker of doubt, a crack in the armor. His hand slid from his coat pocket. I tensed, every muscle ready to run, but instead of a gun, he pulled out a phone. He held it up, the screen glowing. You think you are in control, he said, but I have men around this yard right now. One word from me and you will not leave. Behind my ear, Sarah's voice snapped. He is bluffing. I scanned the area, no signals but his, call him on it. I met his stare. Then say the word. His eyes narrowed, he hesitated. The silence stretched too long, he was bluffing. My pulse surged, I stepped forward, my voice sharper. You killed Arthur because he would not bend, you killed Reynolds because he would not bow, but you will not kill me, not because you cannot, but because you are already losing. The truth is out. Right now, people are reading contracts with Blackwood's signature. They are seeing offshore accounts with his name. They are watching your empire crumble. Daniel's face hardened, but his voice cracked just enough. You do not understand, he is untouchable. No one is untouchable, I shot back. The recorder hummed in my pocket, sealing every word. Suddenly headlights flared at the edge of the yard, washing the scene in blinding white. Tires screeched as cars pulled in, doors slamming. My heart leapt, but Sarah's voice steadied me. Not as men, reporters, they tracked the second leak to this place. Daniel's face fell. He turned, his expression twisting with fury as cameras lifted, flashes exploding in the night. Reporters shouted questions, their voices cutting through the air. Mr. Collins, were you working with Senator Blackwood? Did you threaten Olivia Hayes to keep her silent? Is this the same Daniel mentioned in Arthur Hayes' investigation notes? He spun back to me, rage burning in his eyes. You did this. I met his gaze without flinching. No, Arthur did this, I just carried the torch. The crowd surged closer. Daniel's mask cracked. He shoved past them, disappearing into the shadows of the yard, his voice swallowed by the noise. I stood frozen, flashes burning my vision, microphones thrust toward me, questions pounding from every side. My chest heaved, my breath shaking. Sarah's car screeched to the curb, her voice in my ear. Get in. Now. I pushed through the chaos, climbed into the passenger seat, and slammed the door shut. She hit the gas and we tore away, leaving the yard behind us in a blaze of noise and light. For a long time, neither of us spoke. My hands trembled in my lap. Sarah finally broke the silence. The leak is everywhere. Blackwood is finished. The accounts are undeniable. The recordings are viral. Your father's name is out too, but now it is clear he was being used. He will not carry this blame alone anymore. My throat tightened. I thought of my parents sitting in their pristine house, the fear that had chained them for decades finally breaking. I thought of my mother's tears, my father's stern silence. Maybe now, finally, they could breathe free. "Arthur," I whispered, "we did it." The city lights streaked past as Sarah drove, her hand gripping the wheel, her expression fierce but proud. "You did it," she said. "You carried the story no one else would, and you survived." I leaned back, the recorder still warm in my pocket, my chest aching but lighter than it had ever been. The fear was still there, but beneath it was something stronger. Resolve, hope. I knew the fight was not over. Men like Blackwood did not fall quietly. He would claw, deny, smear, fight to the last breath. But the world had seen behind the curtain now. The cracks could not be sealed. As dawn broke over the city, I felt the weight of blood and silence lift from my shoulders. I was no longer just Arthur's niece. I was a journalist, a fighter, a voice, and I would never be silent again.